Welcome to CEO Zones, Meet the Speaker series. I'm really honored to have a friend as our guest today, Mark Sanborn. Mark is the author of 8 books. He's an international speaker. He has clients like Costco, FedEx, St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, and thousands of others since he's spoken about 3,000 times or more. Maybe he'll update that number today. He's been married to Darla for a very long time. I don't know the number of years, but I'm going to guess more than 30, just as a hunch. And he can clarify that. And I know that if we listen to Audible, we know he has 2 sons, Hunter and Jack. And Hunter, early in life, got to be some of the examples and some of the stories that make us remember what makes Mark stand out. And his mantra is, a few of us can be famous, but every one of us can be great. And Mark, I'm going to kind of take another second to say about 25 years ago, since I'm not exactly sure how long you've been married, but about 25 years ago, Charles Tremendous Jones introduced us on the phone one day. He said, Bill, we've got this new book. It's called The Fred Factor, which I know your newest book, you did the 20th anniversary. It's over my right shoulder, the new cover. And you've updated it a little bit. It's got some changes, but the story still remains the same, and the principles of Fred remain the same. But somewhere around 2002, 2003 is I think when we met. Then I had the opportunity to have you at our company as a keynote speaker back in 2012 at Main Point. And there you talked about you don't need a title to be a leader, which was exactly what Main Point needed at that point in time in 2012. And as we race forward to 2024, Main Point is now a very large global company, part of the SGS family, a Swiss-based company, over $7 billion. And I was fortunate enough to be blessed to sell my portion of that several years ago. And it's already 2024, so I'll skip ahead. What did I leave out, Mark, that would be important to you to share with the CEO and business owner audience today?
Well, that was a great overview. I've been married coming up on 29 years, so not quite 30.
Okay.
My wife might think it seems like 40, but it's been 29 officially. And yes, Charlie Tremendous Jones, I've written about a number of times, was a great mutual friend, probably the closest thing to my biological father, a kind of a spiritual father, and a great friend for many, many years until he passed. And a lot of what I've learned from him, and I'm sure what you've learned from him too, continues to impact your life. If anyone is even slightly curious how I ended up now having been a professional speaker for coming up on 40 years, and that's one of the things I'm proudest of, because it's easy to be a speaker in a flavor of the day profession, where for a few years people kind of go on a tear because they did or accomplished something that put them in the news, but over time that faded. I've been speaking as a non-celebrity speaker all this time because I hope I've remained relevant and developed material. That's one of the reasons that I write books. I don't just write books for my audiences. I write books for me because it forces me to think deeper and dig deeper, and then I try to share what I find. But I grew up on a farm in Northeast Ohio, right next door to Pennsylvania. It was a dairy farm, a couple hundred acres that my father and grandfather farmed together. I was fortunate because no one ever asked me if I wanted to work. That was a given. They never said, would you like to bale hay today or feed the cattle? They just said, time to get up. Now, at the time, I guarantee you I did not consider that a blessing. But I do many years later because I learned the power and the gratification that comes from hard work. I got very involved in 4-H and FFA, which were at the time youth organizations. They were primarily rural. And I started speaking in 4-H at the age of 10 in a contest, did badly, and it really frustrated me. So I decided I wanted to learn how to be a public speaker. And then later in FFA as a state and national officer, I got to do a lot of speaking. I gave my first paid speech at the age of 19 while I was a student at Ohio State University. Now that's kind of a quick synopsis of what got me interested, not just in speaking, but in leadership, because I learned about leadership through both 4-H and FFA as well. And I combine those two things together because if you're a CEO or a manager, it doesn't really matter if you're in sales or if you're an entry level employee. Your ability to communicate well will probably be one of the most single advantageous levers that you have for your success in life. Now, unfortunately, we live in an age where sometimes people can communicate well, but they aren't communicating truthfully, accurately, or they don't have anything to say. So I think that the key is to have expertise that you communicate eloquently, that, to have knowledge that you communicate effectively. And that is one of the central tenets of all effective leadership.
Excellent. Thank you. Uh, so naturally, I reread most of your books, listened to Audible as I was driving around from my cabin to the house and taking my mother-in-law back home this past weekend, which was a great trip. Uh, can you explain? Well, I guess I'll put it this way. I was the recipient, and I don't know if you realized it or not, of your one a day principle last week. You and I were on the phone. I started the conversation using the word frustrated, which I later read in your book, what you take as frustrated. And immediately you went from an author speaker in my world, in our relationship, to you coached and mentored me in like 12 seconds because we were both a little bit rushed on the phone. I'll say 12 minutes probably is truthful. Uh, but did you realize that that was your one a day principle, or did that not count what you did for me?
Well, it counts now that I know. You know, one of the things I try, and it's taken me a very long time to learn much of what I know now, and it's taken me even longer to learn to consistently implement what I talk about. I think one of the great benefits of being a speaker or a coach is that if you don't practice what you teach, it creates a lot of cognitive dissonance. You know, you kind of become your own accountability system. And so I look for opportunities to add value to people, and it's not always a conscious decision because I've been trying to do that for a long time. But probably, and I appreciate, by the way, very much you saying that. I didn't know that had that impact, and that's an important lesson for all of us. Sometimes little things we do, we never get the feedback or the proof that they meant something to someone. So you do a lot of those little things, knowing that not all of them will be received well or appreciated, but a few will. And one of the things that I think has enabled me to become better at that is I've slowed down a bit. And I spent most of my career going 100 miles an hour with my hair on fire. And what I learned is, and this is a cliche, I apologize if you've heard it before, but you know, if you're moving too fast, nothing good ever catches you. And I think that it's taken me a while to learn about the importance of margins. And part of that is just lifestyle. You know, after you've been in a business long enough, you aren't as rushed as the business grows and as you've learned the processes of what it takes to keep the business growing. But slowing down is the best way to spot opportunities to be of value. I often tell a story, Bill. It's not a positive story, but it's about me. I was getting off an airplane, and on the concourse ahead of me, not the concourse, but the jetway, there was a very small woman whose job was to push a wheelchair, and there was someone in the wheelchair, and she could not get the wheelchair over that little steel lip that allows the jetway to expand and contract. And I was in a hurry, so I saw that as an obstacle, and I thought, wow, why would they hire someone that isn't big enough to push it? And I tried to squeak around, you know, I'm like, excuse me. And the guy behind me said, ma'am, can I help? And that was a great epiphany because I was violating everything that I espoused. You know, I was moving too fast. So what I saw as an obstacle, the guy behind me, and I never met him, but he was a great teacher, saw as an opportunity. So that's why I say sometimes, you know, we have to move fast in business. We live in a fast-paced world, but we don't have to run scared, and we don't have to run so fast that we miss the opportunities to be of service.
Thank you. And yes, you can log that in your leading indicator. You made a big impact. and it caused other people around me a little bit of work the next hour or two after that, but that's okay. It was good.
So they're not counting it as as one a day.
Well,
They're saying, who did Bill talk to that put him on this course?
yeah, that finally got him going straight ahead instead of zigzagging. So thank you. Um, I guess one of my standard questions would be, who would you consider to have been a role model, a mentor? You already mentioned Charlie Tremendous Jones. He was a role model mentor to both of us and many, many thousands of people. But is there someone else that early in your career you read, you listened to, kind of helped you think, if you will?
There, there were a lot of people. Books I think of as mentors of sorts. I say two of my favorite mentors are dead Brits, C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton. Both, well, actually, Lewis died on the same day that Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. So one of the great apologists and philosophers of our times, death was kind of overshadowed by the assassination of the president. Chesterton passed before I was born, and yet when you read their books, it's like, and a good book is this way, like you're having a conversation with the author. So over the course of my lifetime, there have been many mentors through books. But when I first got involved in FFA, there were two people, and back then we didn't call it mentoring or coaching. We have words now that we use.
Right.
But back then, the closest I can come is I had two people that really built into my life. The first was a guy named Dr. Earl F. Cantner. Everybody called him Doc. He was the head of vocational education, or executive secretary, more accurately, of vocational education in FFA in Ohio. And when I was a state officer, he was, a tough but fantastic coach. He taught me a lot about good speaking. He taught me a lot about etiquette. He taught me, and this is the important thing, if you're a mentor, the only thing better than teaching those you mentor what to do is teaching them how to think. And so Doc taught me how to think, and I stayed in touch with Doc. He passed just a year and a half ago, well into his 90s, and I would call him on a regular basis because I had, I love the guy, but I had a debt of gratitude for him. There was another guy nobody probably will have heard of, although he has a business that has lived beyond him, a guy named Ed Johnson. He was a broadcaster. He had something called the Agribusiness Network. It still exists today. I'm not sure that's the exact name that it's called. But again, Ed just built into my life. He was a role model that Doc Cantner introduced us to, and we'd go and have cookouts as an officer team on his farm. But Ed took a personal interest, and he invited me. He was at the time the national track announcer for the NTPA, National Tractor Pullers Association, and I announced a few tractor pulls thanks to him. He taught me, again, as an example, a lot about speaking, and just was unequivocally one of the most upbeat people that I ever met. Regrettably, passed away too soon, but since then there have been dozens, probably, if I started to count. But those were the first two, and maybe my ag teacher in high school, because he certainly took a personal interest. He didn't have to. He only needed to take as much interest in me as any other student, but he built into my life. And that's the phrase that I like more than coaching or mentoring. Coaching typically is an ongoing process, as is mentoring. But I think every day we can take an interest in people and build into their lives without it becoming a formal or even a long-term process.
Thank you. So my experience with 4-H, just to close that loop, my queen of now nearly 50 years, next year will be married, was in 4-H, and she was a square dance state champion. And I learned how to square dance because of her. I didn't do it after we got married for whatever reason, but I was a square dancer for about 3 years. And she actually went and I didn't go with her, but she went and represented the United States in Romania back in the early 70s. and they did a program of teaching square dancing and all about FFA, 4-H, and those types of things in Romania. So,
Well,
in any
tell
event,
her when I was in 4-H, I was a square dance caller for
oh
4-H
wow,
square dances. And that is a
okay,
skill I haven't kept up. I probably have like one or two patterns that if I was forced to with a gun to my head, I could call. But well, that's great to know about it. That square dancing's fun. You know, a lot of people, a lot of things that we think are corny or wouldn't be interesting, we only think that because we don't know about them. And square
right.
dancing is really a fun dance genre.
Well, fortunately, that's the only dance I could learn. I never learned another dance, but I was intent. I had the right motivation, I guess I'd say.
Good.
Uh, to that, what motivates a person like you? What makes it fun? What makes you get up and have your passion come alive in the daytime?
I think the older you get, the harder it is to stay motivated because when you're young, you have so many options. And as you get older, you still have a lot of options, but those options narrow. I think also you become a bit more cognizant of time. I say when you're 30, there's an end of the runway. When you're my age, you can see it in the distance. Not because I'm particularly old, but I'm certainly not particularly young. And so I would say number one, I'm a person of faith, and that is bedrock for me. I know not everyone shares my faith, and I've always said I am totally copacetic with people who disagree, as long as they know why they disagree. I'm not I have probably a low threshold for people who believe things just because they feel they're true, but haven't done the hard work of finding out if they're true, accurate, or not. But beyond that, I'm lucky. You know, my dad had a great love of reading, and my mom was a teacher, had a great love of learning, and those two things, no matter what happens or where I am in the world, I can do those two things. You know, thanks to technology and books. And then the final part is finding a way. And there's a great book I'd recommend if someone is, I don't know what the age would be, in their 50s or early 60s, called From Strength to Strength. The author's name is Brooks. And, he talks about the fact, and this was a real insight for me, that there's two kinds of knowledge or two kinds of intellect or intelligence, if you will. And when you're young, the first is called fluid. Because when we're young, we do learn faster. A, there's a lot to learn. B, you know, in a kind of a loose metaphor, our brains are emptier than they are. They're not crowded out by other things. And that's the skill of intelligence when you're younger. When you're older, you don't learn as fast. You can continue to learn. You don't learn as fast, but you have what's called crystallized intelligence. And that's the ability to make connections. And that's really been gratifying for me to talk to somebody and have such a wide range of ideas back in the recesses of my brain that the light bulb will come on and I can make a connection. They have the ideas, but they don't have the ideas to make the connection. So it's really fun, and I often do collaborate with people much younger than me on projects because they keep me relevant, and I bring something of value to the party for them because I see connections that no matter how smart they are, they won't see for another 20 or 30 years.
So I guess that would lead me into about tell us a little bit about High Point University, what it means to you, and what have you been doing there? Because that's connection I will put out there on the table. So
Thank you. Well, Ohio State, the Ohio State University, which everyone busts me for. Of course, it's clever,
yeah,
right? They trademarked the Ohio State University, and in PR they say, if you can get somebody's attention, whether it's for a good or a bad reason, you got their attention, and the part gets people's attention. I graduated from Ohio State University, as did my oldest son. The difference is I got a degree in agriculture. He got a degree in aerospace engineering. And Bill, in a week from tomorrow, will wing, become a captain in the U.S. Marine Corps, and will be shipped off to fly. He's an aviator now, but he will fly the F-35B, which anybody listening who knows airplanes is as good as airplanes get. It's the most technologically advanced fighter jet in the world, and so my wife Darla and I are giddy for his success. He's he's done very, very well. And so we both graduated from Ohio State. You know, we're still scarlet and gray guys. And, not but, and my friend, Dr. Nito Kivane, who I've known for over 40 years as a speaker, consultant, business person, and just a great friend, and another guy that I've learned so much from, became president of High Point University. I think it's been 17 or 18 years ago. Hard to believe how fast the time has flown. And he's a great innovator. And in my book, by the way, The Intention Imperative, I do 5 case studies, very different than my other books. And one of the 5 case studies is High Point University. And everything that I write about is true, except the numbers are smaller when I wrote them than they are now, because they continue to grow at a fantastic pace. But Nito put together what he calls access to innovators, and because he wanted students not just to be successful academically, he wanted them to be successful in life. So Steve Wozniak is one of the innovators, and the president of the Dallas Mavericks and the founder of Netflix. And I'm blessed to be the leadership expert in residence at a High Point, and I go down once or twice a year and get as inspired and learn as much from the students there as hopefully they do from me. And that's been a fantastic relationship on a lot of levels. But what's interesting is my work is, and it started in 2004. I wrote The Fred Factor: How Passion in Your Work and Life Can Turn the Ordinary into the Extraordinary. And High Point's motto is choose to be extraordinary. So we are on the same page philosophically and inspirationally as we are pragmatically. So I very much enjoy my work at High Point. If you want to see how academia can be reinvented, if you have a son or a daughter who might be looking at colleges, I really encourage you to at least tour High Point. Even if your son or daughter doesn't go there, you really will be quite amazed. And this year, the enrollment fee was waived, and I'm assuming they'll probably do it again next year. Some of us post on our social media a way to enroll without having that fee paid. And so there's a lot of reasons to check it out. But High Point University in High Point, North Carolina, beautiful campus, and just an incredible opportunity to learn to be successful in life.
I think you shared it's like 500 acres now. So it's a huge place. Is that
closing
correct?
in on 500. They had to buy and scrape over 350 houses to expand the university. And as I understand it, I've never seen it, but there was one guy that wouldn't sell, and I believe he's got this little bungalow surrounded by a large gate or a wall somewhere on campus. I always forget to ask where. Maybe he's changed his mind since that happened. Maybe that little house isn't there anymore.
Okay. Another personal point, I listened or heard or read recently, and I missed this years ago. You're a self-proclaimed gearhead motorcycle guy. So we have lots of touch points over our, I'll call it 3 decades of knowing each other. But today I'm learning and rereading and learning more about you. So I'll go with motorcycles, since I might have a few motorcycles in my garage. So what's your motorcycles like today, if they are? So.
Well, I used to have several motorcycles in my garage, and then when your kids start getting old enough to drive automobiles, you find your garage space diminishes. I started riding, and you'll appreciate this, Bill. My mother read that the best way to keep your son or daughter from riding motorcycles on the street was to get them a dirt bike. So when I was 10, I got my first dirt bike and then continued to ride until I was well into my 50s. So much for that theory. Yeah, but I went from dirt biking to road biking. I rode motorcycle in college. I moved to Wisconsin, loved riding in Wisconsin. I did get rid of the motorcycle when I moved to Philadelphia. Philadelphia was not a vehicle-friendly town. I won't go deep.
Still isn't.
It still probably isn't. Yeah, I had a car when I moved there, and after it got broken into about a half dozen times, I just gave up and started using taxis. But then when I moved back to Colorado, I started to ride again. I've ridden everything from touring bikes to sport bikes. I've toured Europe on a motorcycle. But my last few bikes were Harleys. I had a custom Harley I loved custom Harleys. I had a road glide. I had a V Rod, which is the water
Whoa.
cooled rocket. And
Yeah.
then when I got rid of the bikes, it's funny. I always thought, I'll probably go back to riding again. And Bill, I haven't. And although I loved riding, I don't miss it, which I think is God's way of telling me you had a lot of years of accident, injury-free riding, no pressure riding. So I don't ride, but I still love anything with an engine. I love cars. I love airplanes. I love boats, but the only thing better than owning a boat is having a friend that owns a boat. So
Uh,
I've
we
never
have a
owned a boat.
mutual friend
I've
that owns a
electric
big
cars and
boat.
motorcycles. I've flown a lot of airplanes when I was younger, but boats are the one category I can't lay claim to.
Yeah. Our mutual friend, the author of Becoming Invaluable, has a big boat. So we'll leave it at that.
There you
Steve.
go.
Yeah. Okay. So I started as a mini biker. So I was 6 or 7 years old. My dad owned a auto mechanic business, front end alignment, frame straightening. So it was natural. And then I rode dirt bikes even while I was in the Air Force. And now we have dirt bikes on the property and out at Standing Bear Lodge, and UTVs and ATVs. And so when you come visit, we'll get you back into the habit.
Yeah, that'd be great. Did you? I got to ask you. Did you have a Honda 70, that little monocoque frame bike
I
that
did
goes on?
not, but my cousin and one of our council of advisors, Clark Howell, he did. Yep.
Those
He
are
certainly
amazing
did.
collector bikes. They're tiny. They're
Yeah.
used a lot now by adults for pit crew bikes. If you're at a drag race or a road race, they use those little
Yep.
things to run around. But those were an amazing little machine.
Yeah, a couple, I guess it was 3 weeks ago now, the Mecum auction here in Harrisburg, they had 4 or 5 of them. They're going for probably 5 times more than they were new, but
Oh,
still running.
unequivocally, yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm a
Mhm.
big car auction guy. I don't buy cars at auction. I watch auctions and think about the cars I could have and should have bought. But I do. I love Meekum and Barrett Jackson and all of those auctions.
Yes. Um, so I guess I'll mention at this point that part of your generosity is on September 23rd, you're offering to do a webcast, and I believe the title will be "What If Fred Were a CEO?" And so I'm kind of excited about that. I know our audience, that's exactly what they want to hear. How do you take the 4 key principles of being a Fred and what would a CEO do with that? And we can all think of good and bad examples as I'm racing through my mind. And this morning I was thinking about that, especially on September 23rd. So I really appreciate your generosity in doing that for our members. So that's that kind of. I don't know if you want to respond to that in any way, but I had that on my list to at least mention to our audience.
Yeah, and I hope there's 1,000 free webinars you can get every month. And Bill, you and I talk about doing it for free. Couple problems is, number one, you do it for free. People tend to, think it's if it doesn't cost anything, it must not be worth anything. And we're charging for this unless you're a member of CEO Zones. And and I may have beat you to the punch, but whatever money
Fine.
we raise isn't going to Bill or I, it's going to Divine Water, which digs wells for people in South Africa that don't have access to water. And it, it's even if you don't come to the seminar, look up Divine Water and send them some money. You'll feel good about your life and you'll do something truly important. But I do hope that people, and by the way, if you have someone on your team, a C-level exec or even a middle manager, I'm going to talk about how leaders leverage these 4 principles to create positive impact in their organization. So I will focus on CEOs, but don't hesitate to invite others to join me.
Thank you, Mark. I said the 4 principles. You mentioned the 4 principles, but what would our audience know to be the 4 principles?
Well, number one is everybody makes a difference, and everyone immediately thinks that's familiar, except most people believe they can make a difference, that they choose to or they choose not to, that sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And I basically say, from a practical standpoint, how we interact with customers and colleagues during the day either builds them up or takes away. They either, if you think you're neutral, you're probably seen as indifferent or uncaring or uncommitted. So I talk about the pragmatic part of choosing, being intentional about making a positive difference in your work. It's all built on a relationship. Quality of product, service, experience is important, but ultimately the big qualifier. And I'm working with one of the biggest car dealers in the Midwest, and I just did a conference call with them this morning, and they have built a wildly successful car dealership on that very principle. They make sure they know everybody's names. They don't negotiate price. They simply work to make you feel that they are the right place to buy an automobile. So I can tell you from years of experience that this isn't as touchy-feely, but very pragmatic. The third is you can add value to anything you do. It doesn't have to cost a nickel. I teach people how to add value to their businesses without outspending their competition. And then number four is the importance of reinventing yourself as a leader. The motivator motivates him or herself. If you wait for somebody else to do it, you'll be disappointed. So you need to know what's important, what keeps you fresh, what gets you up, as we talked about earlier. And so those are the four principles I'll unpack. We'll leave a little time for Q&A as well.
Thank you. I had to print them out just so you know. I've read, I've studied, but I wanted to make sure I had them handy. But and anyway, I will go there. But so I assume that people can find you at marksanborn.com. Your books are available there. Your books are available at ceozones.com. For speaking engagements, I assume that they would have to reach out to Michelle. Would that be correct?
They would, but if they go to marksanborn.com, that's the only
Okay.
place they need to go. We make it easy for them to inquire about booking me to speak or buying training, or even we offer a license for trainers for the Fred Factor program. So marksanborn.com is what I call the mothership for all things that we do.
Okay. All right. Um, is there anything you wanted to cover today that we didn't? We're right at that 30-minute mark, and we're trying not to make it too long. I'm trying to learn.
No, no,
But anything else?
there's a lot we could talk about. Maybe we'll do it again sometime, Bill. But I would say I'd encourage people to participate in CEO zones. The opportunity to learn not just from the people who are contributors, but collegially from each other, share ideas, ask questions, is a wonderful opportunity. And I would also say that if you possibly can, and we might, I don't know, but it'll probably be available for replay. Do check out the webinar, What If Fred Were CEO, because I promise you I'll share some ideas that will help you grow yourself and grow your business.
Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for being our guest. And I really appreciate your personal mentoring me. I continue to grow from you. So thank you.